Let's take it there to the World Bank. Today provided update to its current Nigeria development report, which covers the period of June to December of 2023, the first 6 months of President Tinubu's twin reforms of fuel subsidy removal and FX market convergence move, among others. Now, leading the presentation here at the Lagos Business School today was Nida Mokhtar. She's an economist. She's also a macroeconomic, trade, and investment expert at the World Bank. Let's listen.
There's a need to maintain the momentum and maybe look at some of the areas. And one of the key areas is revenues. Now, you've seen, I quoted before that Nigeria has one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios in the world. I think you are just ahead of maybe Sudan and Yemen. So, and it's a country of 220 million people. So, your revenue to GDP ratio in 2022 was 6.7%. In 2023, after the subsidy removal as well for the half year, you're going to maybe average around 9%. That's what our estimate. But that's our estimate. Like with the estimation that the revenues from the subsidy removal flow in fully. We're not really seeing that right now. If you look at the two bars at the end, the 2022 big bar and the 2023 big bar, revenue, especially federation revenue, FAC revenues, have stayed stagnant at 2.5% of GDP between the Jan to August. Now, what happens when revenue continues to remain stagnant? When revenues remain stagnant, you need to increase your debt, or you need to continue borrowing because to finance your expenditure. So interest payments continue to rise, right, because you have taken on debt. And so as both rise, your expenditure needs rise. When your expenditure needs rise, your revenues are remaining stagnant, you need to borrow more, your interest payments rise, and you're kind of stuck in a circle, like a cycle. Now, another problem that Nigeria is facing, it's not only that it's borrowing more, it's where it's borrowing from. Given that the rigidities of your budgeting systems, any change to the budget, for example, if you projected 100 as your revenue, and in-year revenues end up being 80. Now you have two options. Well, there are two options the government uses, you only have one option. But the first option is you can go back to the parliament, change your budget and say, look, our revenues fell short mid-year, and we would like to take on more debt from the domestic market, from the international market. However, that's usually a long, lengthy process, and you have to go back and forth between NAS and the executive. The second option that the government seems to be using increasingly is going to the CBN. And we have seen ways and means, which is borrowing from the central bank, increasing. So your budgeted fiscal balance is always a certain number. Your actual fiscal deficit, federal government, has consistently been higher. So, it says it's fiscal balance or fiscal deficit. Your fiscal deficit is always higher than what you budget. As a result, you end up borrowing from the central bank at an increasing rate, and that borrowing is extremely expensive. It is at about 21% right now. It's usually MPR plus 3% with a one-year tenor. 1 year, you have to repay it in 1 year, and it kind of accumulates. You had the securitization done in June of 22.7 trillion, which was a huge stock of your ways and means that was securitized onto more sustainable, cheaper terms, which was a good step from a fiscal perspective. But after that, the exercise of borrowing from the central bank has continued. And this is not only distortionary from a financial perspective, from an economic perspective, it's also extremely inflationary. Central bank is printing money to finance the federal government, or it's taking money from the banking sector in terms of higher cash reserve ratios at zero cost and lending it to the federal government. Either way, it's not the best way for Nigeria to finance its expenditure. So, as mentioned before, Nigeria remains one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios, and raising that revenue, both oil and non-oil, remains critical. If you see the red line, that's the sub-Saharan Africa average, around 18% of GDP. Nigeria, even over the medium term, is going to remain under 10%, even with these reforms. So there needs to be an acceleration of reforms. Something that, again, that Joseph has also highlighted before, the FX market continues to be volatile. Now, we saw the circular come in October from the central bank. We saw a reaffirmation of the willing buyer, willing seller model. We saw 43 items ban removed, which helps remove the fragmentation. But you still have this massive parallel market premium, which is about 40 to 50% right now in the past couple of days. So there's something that's happening, and most of that's happening is a lack of confidence in the market. So there's definitely a need for the central bank specifically, and of course the federal government as well, to build that confidence back up so that your foreign investors start coming in, your foreign portfolio inflows start coming in, and that you start seeing the bit of stability in the Naira. And then we have seen of course, you have already all borne the cost of the petrol price increases, about 160% between pre and post subsidy removal, and about how much? 200% plus for over a year-on-year average. Now you saw the estimates that the petrol price increases, but you've seen the Naira depreciate. You've seen global oil prices rise. But the pump price has stayed the same. So what we're not completely sure is the subsidy back, which is obviously not a result we want to see. Like, all the Nigerians have borne this humongous cost. You don't want to be taking steps backwards to go back towards something that is going to be unsustainable. And right now we think about, our estimates show that the light blue line is if the official exchange rate was used, the official one that's reported NAFIM, the price of the pump should be around 750 Naira per litre on average across Nigeria. And it's currently around 600 to 650. So it's about 100 Naira difference that we can't seem to reconcile. So our question is the subsidy back? Because the government says it's not. What we're seeing in our estimates is that it's back, and that's not a good thing to see, because that makes us fearful that we might see Nigeria going back to its old habits.